The unbreakable ones. The void of space had always been indifferent. It neither mourned the fallen nor celebrated the victors. It simply existed, vast and unyielding, a silent witness to the countless battles that had scarred the cosmos. For centuries, empires had risen and crumbled within its grasp, each believing they had conquered the infinite, until something greater proved them wrong. And now, at the edge of the Orion Arm, the Zorvath Dominion, one of the most feared conquerors in the known galaxy, had encountered something they could not understand. Something that refused to break. Admiral Krex of the Zorvath High Command stood aboard the bridge of his flagship, the Vengeance of Korath. His crimson exoskeletal plates gleamed under the dim lighting, his 6 piercing eyes locked onto the holoscreen before him. The battle should have ended before it even began. It was supposed to be a slaughter. His fleet of 70 warships had surrounded Earth, a backwater planet with no standing interstellar army. Their technology was primitive, their defenses laughable. The Dominion had conquered far greater civilizations with ease. The battle calculations had been clear. Humanity should have been wiped out within minutes. Yet now, 3 days into the siege, Krex found himself staring at a reality that defied reason. The humans, those fragile, insignificant creatures, were still standing. Worse, they were fighting back. The first strike. It began as every Dominion invasion did, swift and merciless. The first wave of plasma lances rained down upon the human cities, their impact enough to vaporize entire districts. The Zorvath had used these weapons countless times before, and they had never failed. Yet this time, something strange happened. The blast struck, the energy flared, and then nothing. Cities that should have been reduced to smoking craters remained intact. Their buildings trembled but did not collapse. Their power grids flickered but held strong. Admiral Krex snarled. The human world should have burned. Instead, the attack had done little more than scorch the pavement. The Zorvath tactical officers scrambled to analyze the results, their frenzied clicks and guttural snarls filling the bridge. Reports flooded in from across the fleet. Admiral. One of his officers turned, mandibles clicking in agitation. Their structures are still standing. Our plasma bombardment failed to inflict structural collapse. Impossible. Krex spat. Run diagnostics. Recalibrate the weapons. Fire again. They did. And again, the humans endured. It wasn't energy shielding that protected their cities, nor was it some arcane alien technology. It was something far more absurd, their own ingenuity. Over the years, Earth's civilizations had suffered endless disasters. Earthquakes, hurricanes, tsunamis, wars. And each time, they adapted. Their buildings had been designed to withstand destruction. Their infrastructure had been built to survive calamities. What should have been their weakness had become their greatest strength. Krex felt the first seed of unease coil within his gut. But that was just the beginning. The immune ones. By the second day, the Zorvath resorted to their next strategy, biological warfare. They had conquered entire species with engineered plagues, viruses designed to unravel DNA, pathogens that liquefied organs within hours. No species had ever resisted them. Until now. They released the airborne strain over the largest human population centers. It should have ended them all overnight. Instead, the humans kept fighting. Reports from Zorvath spies embedded on the surface painted an infuriating picture. Some humans coughed for a day or two. Others barely noticed it at all. And then, they recovered. Krex bared his fangs. How? The answer came swiftly. Human immune systems were unmatched. These creatures had survived plagues and pandemics for millennia. Their bodies had fought off viruses that should have wiped them out countless times over. They had developed medicines, treatments, and natural resistance far beyond what the Dominion had accounted for. What should have decimated them had become nothing more than an inconvenience. And now, the humans were angry. The counterattack. By the third day, the Zorvath fleet had begun its ground invasion. The Dominion had always prided itself on its warrior caste, genetically enhanced, highly trained, and utterly ruthless. Yet the humans did not fight like other species. They did not surrender. They did not flee. They adapted. Reports from the front lines were a mess of chaos and disbelief. Sir, the humans, they're unpredictable. They set traps we can't detect. They ambush from angles no species should be able to move through. They use weapons made for one purpose and turn them into something completely different. A regiment of Dominion shock troopers had been ambushed in a ruined city. They had expected a conventional battle. Instead, they had been picked apart one by humans who moved unseen, striking from vantage points no enemy had ever thought to use. A squadron of Zorvath heavy armor had rolled through the streets of another human city, only to find themselves bogged down by makeshift explosives, improvised barriers, and sniper fire from unseen enemies. Humans fought with a savagery unlike any species before them. They were unpredictable, relentless, and they learned. Every time the Zorvath adapted, the humans adapted faster. And then, on the fourth day, they started winning. The breaking point. Admiral Krex watched in silent rage as his invasion began to collapse. What should have been a swift annihilation had turned into a war of attrition, one the humans were thriving in. The Dominion relied on overwhelming force. The humans relied on defiance. And the worst part, they weren't just surviving. They were laughing. Intercepted transmissions between human soldiers and pilots were filled with humor. One recording played over the bridge, the sounds of laughter echoing through the comms. "Hey, Command, we just took out another walker. That's the 5th one today. You guys sure these aliens are supposed to be tough?" "Yeah, man, I dunno. I thought this was gonna be scary, but honestly, it's kinda fun." Krex's mandibles clenched. They were mocking him. The humans weren't just surviving his invasion. They were enjoying it. The Admiral turned away from the battle display, his claws digging into the steel of his command console. For the first time in Dominion history, a conquest was failing. Not because the enemy was more powerful. Not because they had superior technology, but because they refused to break. And as the first human fleet appeared on the edge of the system, ready to launch their counteroffensive, Krex finally understood the truth. Humanity wasn't a species to be conquered. They were a force to be reckoned with. And for the first time in his long, bloody career, Admiral Krex knew fear. The tides turn. Admiral Krex had never known doubt. He had led over 100 campaigns, crushed civilizations that had stood for millennia, and shattered worlds so thoroughly that their names were lost to history. He had built his reputation on efficiency, brutality, and absolute dominance. But now, for the first time in his long, decorated career, he was losing. And worse, the enemy was laughing at him. The madness of humanity. The Zorvath Dominion had encountered countless alien species. Some fought honorably. Others surrendered to superior firepower. A few launched desperate last stands, but ultimately, they all broke. The humans did not. Intercepted transmissions from the battlefield played across the command bridge, and every single one filled Krex with mounting dread. "You see that? They actually tried to flank us. How cute. Damn, they hit my left side. Guess I'll just use my right. Ain't got time to die." Anyone else find it funny that they keep attacking the same way, expecting different results? Someone should tell them the definition of insanity. Krex bared his fangs. What kind of creatures were these? Even the most warlike species in the galaxy respected battle. They treated it with reverence or fear. But humans, they mocked it. They enjoyed it. They adapted to it. Zorvath tactical officers had spent centuries perfecting the art of psychological warfare. Fear was their primary weapon, an unrelenting, suffocating force that crushed the spirits of those they conquered. But the humans fed on it. They thrived in chaos. And that was when Krex realized the true horror of this war. The Zorvath were predictable. The humans were not. The death of a war machine. On the ground, the battle that should have ended in hours had stretched into days. Zorveth shock troopers, engineered to be the perfect warriors, were breaking down. The humans never fought the same way twice. One regiment buried themselves underground, launching ambushes from hidden tunnels that should not have existed. Another set entire forests on fire, forcing the Dominion's mechanized war beasts into a panicked retreat. A single human platoon was surrounded, and instead of surrendering, they laughed, insulted their captors, and launched an explosive charge while making bets on who could take out the most aliens. The reports made no sense. ***, Commander. The humans are dismantling our war machines with tools they built from scrap metal. Admiral, they've hijacked our artillery. They're using it against us. Sir, we lost control of our orbital cannon. They rewired the targeting system. It's now, playing human music. Krex snarled. What do you mean it's playing music? The officer hesitated, then pulled up the transmission. The vengeance of Korath's internal speakers crackled, and then, across every Zorvath warship, a song began to play. A human voice, deep and taunting, echoed across the Dominion fleet. Nevir Giveup. Krex's claws crushed the armrest of his command chair. They had hijacked his fleet's entire communications network. These mad creatures had not only defied every Dominion war doctrine, they were actively humiliating them. The counteroffensive begins. By the fourth day, the Zorvath were on the defensive. The unstoppable war machine had stalled. Their casualties were mounting. Their morale was breaking. And then, to Krex's utter horror, the humans launched their counterattack. The first human spaceborne assault units emerged from hidden bases on the Moon and Mars, their warships moving far faster and more unpredictably than Dominion models. Zorvath fleet doctrine relied on brute force and overwhelming firepower. Human tactics were something else entirely. ***, they moved erratically, unpredictably. ***, like predators who fought for sport. Human fighters would feign retreat, only to turn at impossible angles and launch attacks from unexpected vectors. Their battleships utilized weapons that should have been outdated, yet they modified them in ways the Dominion had never seen before. They jammed enemy transmissions, flooded the Zorvath with false battle data, and even, somehow, redirected enemy plasma fire back at its source. Krex watched, helpless, as the impossible unfolded before him. For the first time in Dominion history, the unstoppable fleet was losing. And the humans, they were laughing as they did it. The final stand of the Dominion. By the fifth day, the Zorvath command structure was in shambles. Entire divisions had gone silent. The once mighty fleet was in retreat, its warships falling apart under human counterfire. And then the final blow came. A single human warship, a battle-scarred, rugged vessel held together by welded scraps and sheer stubbornness, broke through the Dominion's defensive line. It should not have been possible. And yet it was. Krex's 6 eyes widened as the enemy vessel launched a transmission directly to his flagship. The holoscreen flickered to life. And there, standing with a cocky smirk and a fresh bruise on his temple, was a human. He looked disheveled, blood running down the side of his face, his uniform torn, but his eyes burned with defiance. Krex knew a warlord when he saw one. This was no mere soldier. This was a survivor. The human leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Hey, Admiral," he said casually. "You look stressed. Wanna talk about it?" Krex hissed. The human grinned. No. That's cool. Just thought I'd let you know. You lost. Krex's claws dug into the console. "This war is not over," he growled. The human tilted his head. "Oh, are you sure?" He gestured behind him. The holoscreen flickered, revealing the remains of the Dominion fleet. Half-destroyed warships, captured vessels, Zorvath soldiers being taken as prisoners, Not with cruelty, but with an unsettling casual indifference. The human smiled. "Because it kinda looks over to me." Krex's mandibles clenched. For the first time in his life, the great admiral of the Zorvath Dominion had no words. The human leaned closer. "Welcome to the end of your empire," he whispered. The transmission cut out, and Admiral Krex, once the most feared warlord in the galaxy, realized the truth. He had lost. Humanity's triumph, the Dominion's fall. The bridge of the vengeance of Koreth was silent. Not the tactical silence of a waiting ambush, nor the tense stillness before battle. No, this was the silence of despair. Admiral Krex stared at the holoscreen, his 6 crimson eyes fixated on the image of a laughing human. The human fleet was no longer a ragtag assembly of battered ships. It was an unstoppable force. And the Zorvath Dominion, an empire that had lasted for thousands of years, was on the verge of collapse. All because of one species, a species that was supposed to be weak, a species that was supposed to be primitive, a species that refused to break. The humiliation of the Zorvath. The Zorvath military doctrine had always been simple: hit first, hit hardest, and leave nothing standing. But their tried and true strategies had failed. Their unstoppable fleets had been stopped. Their fear tactics had been laughed at. And now, the once mighty war machine of the Dominion was falling apart. Planetary invasion forces, cut off and routed. Orbital bombardment, rendered ineffective by human resilience and adaptive engineering. Biowarfare, useless against a species with the most infuriatingly durable immune systems the Dominion had ever encountered. Psychological warfare, a disaster. Instead of terrorizing the human populace, they had become a joke. Throughout Dominion-occupied territory, humans mocked their invaders openly. The once feared Zorvath warriors were now the subject of internet memes, broadcast across captured Zorvath communication networks. One intercepted human transmission had been particularly damning. "These guys came all this way just to lay RP as invaders and take an L kinda sad." Really? Krex's claws dug into the metal armrest of his command chair. How had it come to this? The rise of a new power. The human counteroffensive had begun as small skirmishes, unpredictable ambushes, and improvised resistance efforts. Now, it was a full-blown war of liberation. Across the Dominion's occupied planets, humans were rallying, not just themselves, but other subjugated species. The Zorvath had spent centuries crushing rebellions before they could even begin. But the humans fought differently. They didn't just free themselves. They inspired others to rise. For the first time in history, planets that had been under Zorvath control for generations were fighting back. Human-led insurgencies were toppling entire military installations with tactics that made no sense to Zorvath strategists. They used guerrilla warfare, propaganda, and psychological manipulation that the Dominion had never accounted for. Their technological inferiority. It no longer mattered. Because the humans had stolen Dominion ships, hacked into Dominion systems, and even reverse-engineered Dominion weapons, turning them against their creators. The humans had taken the best the Zorvath had to offer, and made it better. And now, for the first time in history, the war was at the Dominion's doorstep. The fall of the fleet. The first warning signs came from the outer defensive perimeter of Zorvath space. A single distress call, an automated ping from one of the Dominion's border outposts. Then another. Then 10 more. And then, an entire sector went dark. Krex's claws twitched as he processed the reports. Human warships had entered Dominion space. And they weren't just attacking. They were hunting. Their fleets moved in ways no Zorvath strategist could predict. Their pilots defied physics, executing maneuvers that should have shredded their ships apart. And yet, they worked. Their soldiers fought like lunatics, setting impossible traps, hijacking enemy communications, and even using captured Zorvath weapons in ways they were never designed for. Within hours, the Dominion had lost 17 key defensive stations, Within a day, the humans had wiped out an entire fleet division. By day 3, the Dominion's entire northern sector had fallen. Krex felt something alien settle into his bones. Panic. And then came the final transmission. A live feed sent directly to the vengeance of Korath. The holoscreen flickered, and Krex felt his stomach twist. A human stood on the bridge of a captured Zorvath dreadnought, a ship that should have been impossible for them to control. And yet, they had done it. The human's face was bruised, blood drying on his temple. His uniform was scorched. He should have looked defeated. Instead, he grinned. "Hey, Admiral," the human said, his voice crackling through the transmission. "Surprised to see me?" Krex's mandibles clicked in fury. "Your insolence." Yeah, we're insolent, and foolish, and whatever. I get it." The human waved dismissively. "Here's the thing, though. You lost. Again." Krex's hands curled into fists. "You have no right to." The human stepped aside, revealing the bridge of the dreadnought. And Krex felt his blood run cold. Zorvath officers, his officers, stood bound and disarmed. Human soldiers manned the controls, inputting coordinates Krex couldn't see. And there, in the center of the screen, was the Zorvath homeworld. "You feel that?" the human asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Krex narrowed his eyes. "Feel what?" The human leaned in close to the camera, his grin widening. "That's the feeling of your empire dying." Then the screen went dark, and in the vast void of space, a fleet of stolen Zorvath warships, now under human control, prepared for the final assault. The end of an era. Admiral Krex had led the Dominion's greatest conquests. He had crushed rebellions, dismantled civilizations, and slaughtered billions. But now he was the one being hunted. The Zorvath had never faced an enemy like humanity. Because humanity did not fight for conquest. They fought for survival, for freedom, and now they fought for revenge. And as the first wave of captured Dominion warships emerged from hyperspace, as human pilots, flying stolen Zorvath fighters, screamed through the void, their voices filled with laughter and fury. As the humans brought the war to the very heart of the Dominion, Admiral Krex knew one undeniable truth. The age of the Zorvath was over, and the age of humanity had begun. Humanity's reckoning, the Zorvath homeworld, Korath Prime, had never known fear. For over 6 millennia, it had stood as the beating heart of a brutal empire, an indomitable bastion of power, conquest, and order. Its towering obsidian spires reached into the sky, its massive orbital defenses capable of reducing entire fleets to ash. No enemy had ever breached its defenses. No war had ever reached its doorstep. Until now, humanity had arrived. The storm breaks. Admiral Krex stood at the bridge of the vengeance of Korath, his exoskeletal hands curled into trembling fists. For the first time in Dominion history, their home was under siege. And the worst part, it wasn't even their own ships launching the attack. Across the holoscreens, the impossible was unfolding. Hundreds of Dominion warships, commandeered by humans, moved in perfect formation. Zorvath defensive cannons fired, but their automated targeting systems refused to recognize their own ships as enemies. Humans had hacked Dominion targeting protocols, making the homeworld's own defenses hesitate. Zorvath warships scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. Because humans never played by the rules. The madmen of war. No Zorvath strategist could have predicted the way humanity fought. Their fleets didn't charge in waves. They didn't follow standard battle formations. Instead, they swarmed like chaos incarnate. They attacked from angles no pilot should have been able to fly. They disabled, captured, and repurposed Zorvath technology in ways that defied logic. Human soldiers landed on orbital defense platforms, tearing through automated security like hungry wolves let loose in a slaughterhouse. They didn't just fight. They humiliated. A Zorvath battleship attempted to fire its main cannons, only to find its weapon systems hijacked. The main screen of the entire Dominion battle network flickered to life, and to Krex's mounting horror, he saw a human soldier, grinning. "Hey, fellas," the human said, leaning lazily against a captured Zorvath console. "You mind if we borrow your guns for a bit?" The Zorvath homeworld's planetary shields flickered, then collapsed. And for the first time in history, Korath Prime was defenseless. The fall of an empire. The first human ground troops landed within the hour. The Zorvath had always expected that any battle reaching their homeworld would be fought against an enemy so broken and demoralized that resistance would be futile. They had never encountered humans before. They had never faced an enemy that, even in victory, fought harder. Human war cries echoed across the city streets as fire teams moved with surgical precision, sweeping through Zorvath command centers, disabling defenses, and taking prisoners rather than killing. Prisoners. The concept was alien to the Zorvath. When they had conquered others, they had never shown mercy. But humans didn't just conquer. They made a point. Entire platoons of Zorvath soldiers surrendered, their weapons thrown to the ground as human soldiers bound them, forced them into makeshift holding zones, then treated their wounds. Krex watched in horror as human combat medics treated his own men's injuries. One broadcast, a live feed from the surface, made his stomach churn. A Zorvath officer, bleeding from his side, looked up at a human soldier, eyes filled with fear. "Why?" the officer hissed, his mandibles twitching. "Why do you fight like this? Why do you not kill us?" The human knelt beside him, smirking. "Oh, don't get me wrong. We could. But that wouldn't be fun." The Zorvath blinked. "Fun?" The human's grin widened. "You don't learn from death. You learn from losing." Krex felt his blood freeze. This wasn't just a war. This was a lesson. The end of Krex's reign. The bridge of the vengeance of Korath was eerily quiet. The fleet was gone. The empire was in shambles. And Krex knew the war was lost. A single message pinged across the command network, a direct transmission from the captured Zorvath capital tower. With shaking hands, Krex opened the channel. The screen flickered to life. And there, standing at the heart of the Zorvath High Command's throne room, was the same human who had taunted him before. The soldier stood among the fallen banners of the Dominion, his uniform scorched but his grin still intact. He held a Dominion flag in one hand. Then, slowly, deliberately, he dropped it to the ground. Krex's vision darkened. "This is impossible," he whispered. "This is not how empires fall." The human chuckled. "You still don't get it, do you?" Krex snarled, his fangs bared. "Get what?" The human stepped closer to the camera, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You never stood a chance." The transmission cut out. And at that moment, Admiral Krex, once the most feared warlord in the galaxy, fell to his knees, because he knew it was true. The war was over, and humanity had won. The birth of a legend. The Zorvath Dominion did not fall in flames. It fell in humiliation. Captured, disarmed, forced to watch as their conquerors, humans, rewrote the galaxy's power structure. They were not executed. They were not enslaved. Instead, they were left to rebuild. And under the watchful eye of humanity, they did. The war was not forgotten, but it became something more. A lesson, a warning, a legend, a single phrase passed down through generations of Zorvath, whispered in fear and respect. A phrase that echoed across the stars, ensuring that no species would ever make the same mistake again. Never fight the humans, because they don't just survive. They thrive. They adapt. And when the dust settles, they'd always win.